Alright, let's dive into this one. Before anything else, drop a random Cowboys player in the comments. It doesn't have to be a superstar. It could be a guy who was around for one season, a throwback legend, or even someone completely obscure. Just throw a name out there and let's have some fun with it. Now, moving on, we've got a ton to unpack today when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys. And the name at the center of this first big wave is Donovan Wilson. There's been some noise recently sparked by a take that surfaced online, a tweet, actually, suggesting that Wilson could be on the chopping block. The argument made was that the Cowboys could save a solid $8.65 million in cap space by cutting him after June 1st. That's a pretty eye-catching number, right? Sounds like a significant cap move. But when you start peeling back the layers, there's a lot more to this situation than just a line item on a spreadsheet. First off, the number that's being tossed around isn't even accurate. That $8.65 million isn't the money the Cowboys would save. That's actually Wilson's cap hit for the 2025 season. If the Cowboys cut him today, right now, on May 27th, they'd save closer to $5.35 million. If they wait until after June 1st, that number bumps up to $7 million in savings. Not 8, not even close. And those are the exact same savings they'd get if they were to trade him instead. So it's important to get the numbers right before jumping to conclusions. But here's where things get even more interesting. The Cowboys didn't need to wait until June to get those savings. They could have made Wilson a post-June first cut months ago. That window opened back in March. They had the chance, they had the flexibility, and they chose not to go that route. That's telling. Because if the front office really wanted to move on from Wilson and free up cap space, they already had a path laid out to do exactly that, and they didn't take it. Now, to be fair, Dallas did re-sign a few safeties. Marquise Bell and Wanya Thomas both came back, and Israel Mukumu is still in the mix. But let's be real here. These aren't marquee additions. Bell and Thomas came back on cheap restricted free agent tenders, and Mukumu, while versatile, isn't guaranteed a roster spot. There hasn't been a wave of new blood brought in to push Wilson off the depth chart. No splash signings. No high draft picks. Just a quiet offseason at the safety position. And that, more than anything, points to the Cowboys' intention to keep things steady. So let's talk about Donovan Wilson himself. He's not some random back-of-the-roster name. We're talking about a guy who's been a key contributor on this defense. He brings physicality, energy, and an edge that fits perfectly with Dan Quinn's old system. And now, with Mike Zimmer stepping in, Wilson's style might actually mesh even better with the kind of aggressive, no-nonsense defense Zimmer wants to install. Cutting Wilson now wouldn't just be about money. It would be about taking a proven starter off the field and handing the job to an improving young guy, or hoping a late-round pick or undrafted free agent steps up. That's a big gamble. What makes this even more baffling is that some people seem to think Wilson's role is already being replaced. But again, let's look at the reality. Mukumu has spent more time in the slot than at strong safety. Wanya Thomas and Marquise Bell are exciting young talents, sure, but they're still developing. Bell's shown flashes, and Wanya is a great story, but neither has fully stepped into that every-down impact player role yet. So unless someone in camp completely explodes onto the scene, Wilson still holds significant value. Now, that doesn't mean Wilson's spot is invincible. This is the NFL, and nothing is ever truly guaranteed. If Dallas had drafted a safety early or brought in a proven veteran, this would be a totally different conversation. But they didn't. They've had chances to pivot away from Wilson, back in March, even earlier this month, and they didn't take them. That tells me the coaching staff and front office still believe he's part of the plan. He's not just surviving. He's still expected to contribute. There's also this narrative floating around that June 1st is some magic date where everything changes. That once the calendar flips, teams will suddenly make these big cuts and shake up their rosters. But the truth is, a team can designate a player as a post-June first cut way ahead of time. There's no actual need to wait if they already know what they want to do. In Wilson's case, Dallas had the opportunity and passed on it. So the June 1st date isn't the make-or-break line some people are making it out to be, at least not in this scenario. And if we're being honest, Wilson's play hasn't fallen off a cliff or anything. He's still a solid, physical, downhill safety who brings intensity to the field. Sure, he's not perfect. No one's saying he's an all-pro. But the Cowboys aren't exactly stacked at safety, and they've shown zero urgency in trying to replace him. That says a lot. If anything, Wilson might actually thrive under Zimmer, whose defensive schemes have historically gotten the best out of aggressive safeties. The bigger conversation here is what the Cowboys are doing with their secondary and how that ties into the broader plan for the defense. You've got Malik Hooker back at free safety, bringing range and experience. Wilson fits as the enforcer. Then you've got Bell and Thomas battling for more snaps, which is a good problem to have. If this group can stay healthy and take another step forward, the safety room could quietly become one of the most reliable units on the team. But removing Wilson from that equation without a clear replacement, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, while it's always possible things change between now and training camp, injuries, surprise trades, whatever, I'd still put the odds pretty high that Donovan Wilson is on the Cowboys roster for the 2025 season. Unless there's a major shift or someone unexpected steps up in a big way. The coaching staff seems content to run it back at the safety position, with Wilson still holding a starting spot or, at worst, rotating in heavily. That's not to say there's no room for change. I'd love to see Marquise Bell get more reps, especially with his speed and versatility. Wanya Thomas has upside too. But competition doesn't automatically mean someone's getting cut. It means you push guys to earn their roles, and Wilson has already proven he can do that. He's earned his stripes. And let's not forget, if the Cowboys had really been ready to move on, they had a dozen opportunities to do it. From the end of last season, through free agency, into the draft, at no point did they make a move that screamed, "We're replacing Donovan Wilson." They didn't even hint at it. They didn't spend a mid-round pick on a safety. They didn't sign a mid-level free agent. They didn't even bring in someone to seriously compete for that strong safety spot. All signs point to continuity. And that includes keeping Donovan Wilson in the fold. We're not done yet. There's still a lot to break down, including the offensive line, which I know isn't the flashiest topic, but it's absolutely critical to this team's success moving forward. We've got names like Tyler Guyton, Awesome Richards, and of course, the ever-polarizing Terrence Steele to discuss. The trenches matter, and what happens up front could make or break this season for the Cowboys. But we'll get into that in just a second, because trust me, there's a ton to unpack when it comes to how Dallas is reshuffling the pieces up front and what the expectations are for those guys heading into training camp. Let's keep it rolling now and shift focus to one of the most important and often overlooked aspects of the Cowboys roster, the offensive line. This unit is going through some serious transition, and the questions start piling up fast when you look at who's being discussed to protect the edges. There's been chatter, speculation, even a few articles debating whether Awesome Richards could overtake Tyler Guyton or even Terrence Steele in the starting lineup. And while that might seem like a reach, it's a discussion that brings up some real concerns about where this line is heading in 2025. Let's start with Tyler Guyton, because he's the one peg to step into that crucial left tackle role. And make no mistake, the Cowboys need him to step up. He was the clear-cut disappointment last season, and it showed in just about every measurable way. Penalties were a huge issue. Technique was inconsistent, and the trust between him and the coaching staff, that seemed to fade as the year went on. There were moments where it honestly looked like the team didn't fully believe in him, which might have been more about the staff than the player, but still, that hesitation matters. Now, the fan base is divided. Some people look at Guyton and still see potential. Others are done with the project, convinced he was a reach in the draft and ready to move on. And it almost feels like some fans are rooting for him to fail just to validate their initial takes. But that doesn't change the fact that Guyton has to develop. That's the job. He came in as a developmental player, and if there's no sign of growth in year two, then it's not just concerning. It's a problem. You can't afford to have your left tackle, arguably the second most important player on your offense after the quarterback, still trying to figure out this late in the game. Confidence in Guyton is probably hovering somewhere between cautious optimism and straight-up panic, depending on who you ask. But the Cowboys don't have the luxury of waiting forever. They need answers, and they need them fast. Which brings us to Awesome Richards, a guy who's being quietly hyped up as a potential swing tackle, or even a starter if things break his way. Richards played 181 snaps last season, and if you look at pressure rate allowed, his numbers aren't all that different from Guyton's. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement for either, but it does make you wonder just how close this competition really is. Now, Richards didn't rack up penalties like Guyton, which is a plus, but he also didn't stand out as a run blocker. And for a guy who's being talked about as a possible starter, it's a little worrying that he never even got a shot to line up at right tackle last year. If we're pitching him as the swing guy, the one who can plug in on either side if needed, then how come he's barely taken snaps at right tackle, not just in the NFL, but even going back to college? He's got over 2,000 snaps at left tackle, just 21 at right tackle. That's a red flag. So then comes the big question. Is Richards actually a viable replacement for Terrence Steele on the right side? Because that's the debate that's been floating around. But based on usage and experience, the answer leans heavily toward no. If anything, Richards feels more like competition for Guyton than for Steele. And that's not exactly good news. Because if Guyton loses that battle, that means his development has stalled out entirely. That would put the Cowboys in a really tough spot on the left side of the line, forcing them to lean on a backup-level guy in a position where you can't afford inconsistency. Let's talk about Terrence Steele then, because his name always stirs things up. And here's the thing. The Cowboys actually like him a lot more than fans think. The front office still believes in him. The new coaching staff believes in him. And the buzz inside the building is that this new scheme being brought in by Clayton Adams and offensive line coach Connor Riley could be exactly what Steele needs to get back to his 2022 form. That's the version of Steele who is a legitimate force in the run game and a serviceable pass protector. Not perfect, but good enough to lock down the right side. But last season, that wasn't the guy we saw. Steele struggled badly. He got beat far too often by quality edge rushers and looked like a shadow of the player who had emerged as a reliable starter just a year earlier. This upcoming season feels like a crossroads for him. It's a make-or-break year, plain and simple. If he doesn't bounce back, if he doesn't show that he can hold his own consistently, then Dallas is going to have to look elsewhere in 2026, and maybe even sooner if things spiral quickly. The Cowboys can save $14 million by cutting Steele after June 1st, so the financial incentive is there. But unless someone truly steps up and steals that job from him in camp, the team's betting on a bounce back. They've structured their roster like they believe he'll regain form. They didn't draft a right tackle to compete with him. They didn't sign a proven veteran. It's all riding on Steele getting back to where he was. And that's a gamble, but it's a calculated one. So let's piece it all together. You've got Guyton trying to prove he's worth the investment at left tackle. Richards trying to show he can be more than a fill-in. And Steele trying to recapture the magic before time runs out. It's a trio full of questions and pressure, and all three of them are walking into the 2025 season with something to prove. The Cowboys' offensive line might not be the flashiest group, but it's absolutely one of the most critical. And if these guys don't step up, it's not just the line that's going to suffer. It's the entire offense. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Whispers are heating up around Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys as the young linebacker finds himself in a tense standoff with the media. Known for his fierce intensity and game-changing presence on the field, Parsons has recently voiced sharp criticism of the press, urging them not to underestimate the Cowboys' defense. The brewing conflict has ignited speculation about what's really going on behind the scenes in Dallas, stirring a storm of rumors among fans and insiders alike. Micah Parsons, who quickly rose to prominence as one of the NFL's most dynamic defenders, has never been shy about speaking his mind. This time, however, his comments seem to carry a sharper edge, suggesting frustration with the way media outlets have portrayed the Cowboys' defensive unit. "Don't underestimate our defense," Parsons reportedly told reporters after a recent practice, a statement that many interpreted as a direct challenge to critics who have questioned the team's defensive capabilities this season. The Cowboys, often spotlighted for their explosive offense, have had their defense overshadowed in headlines. But Parsons' outburst hints at a growing desire within the squad to reclaim the narrative and prove doubters wrong. Insiders whisper that this tension isn't just about media portrayal. It might also reflect deeper frustrations within the locker room about how the defense is viewed externally. Could this be a sign that Parsons is stepping up not only as a leader on the field, but also as a vocal protector of his teammates and the team's reputation? This friction with the media is stirring talk about how it could impact Parsons' approach moving forward. Will this fire drive him to even greater heights, pushing the Cowboys' defense to new levels? Or might it create unnecessary distractions in a team that has playoff ambitions? Analysts are divided. Some see Parsons' stance as a sign of maturity and leadership, while others worry about potential fallout from ongoing media clashes. Rumors also swirl about how head coach Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys front office are handling the situation. Sources suggest they might be encouraging Parsons to channel his frustrations positively, using the criticism as fuel for the team's collective drive. After all, with Parsons' talent and determination, the Cowboys' defense could very well become one of the league's most feared units. If only the media would stop writing them off so quickly. As the season unfolds, all eyes will be on Parsons and his teammates to see if their defense can silence the doubters once and for all. Whether this media war is just a momentary flare-up or the start of a bigger battle remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. Micah Parsons is ready to fight on the field and off it to make sure the Cowboys' defense gets the respect it deserves. The question now is, will the media listen? That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.